So 20 minutes before the round, finally there are pairings, and I play against another young boy. My hope is that since it's really just 18 minutes before the round, and of course I hope that he will not be able to prepare, like having no time to prepare. So then I will try my like tricky opening and beating him like this. I mean, otherwise we're gonna just play and play. Especially since I play black. So by the way, looks like not an easy boy. Okay, let's try. Yes, I need to win and escape from this area of young players. So round 3, and another young boy, 13 or 14 years old, rated 2204, and I played black. E4, C5. This time, since it was just like 20 minutes before the round, I mean when pairings were out, so I decided it makes sense to try my tricky line in the Sicilian with knight f6. By the way, I have been playing it for 15 years. Knight c3, d5, e d5, knight d5, bishop b5, bishop d7, and here he did well, knight e5, even though he wasn't prepared for this game, for this opening, I think, but knight e5 is like the main move in this position. Knight f6, and here there is a better move, which is queen f3. While in the game it was knight takes d7, knight takes d7, d4, e6. Here something like d5 seems to be natural, but actually it's just a blunder, since after e takes d5, white should just play something like castling or bishop g5, since in case of knight d5, knight takes d5, queen takes d5, surprisingly queen a5 and queen takes b5. The idea for me is not to take on d4, not developing his queen for free. So that's why e6, and I'm waiting for him to take on c5 and developing my bishop for free. So in the game it was bishop g5, a6 attacking the bishop, bishop takes d7, queen takes d7. Here I'm okay about bishop takes f6. In the game it was d takes c5, queen c6. I don't want to take on d1 myself, since after this bishop takes, pawn takes, knight e4, knight d6, and position is just equal. There is really not much to play here. And kind of similar story after bishop c5. It's also about queen takes d7 probably. So that's why queen c6 attacking the g2 pawn, castling, and bishop c5. And here it was a critical moment. If you would like, you can think a bit about this position, what white should have played here. And he should have taken on f6, g takes f6, and queen h5. And here the black king is kind of weak. It's not that clear which side to go or to keep it in the center. So it's a choice, and it's not like that obvious what to do. While in the game it was queen d2, and now it's a nice and important move by me. Simply bishop e7, so preventing the capture on f6. I mean, now after bishop f6, I just play bishop takes f6 and everything is fine for me. Rook a d1 castles, queen e2, and now we can see why it was important to take on f6 when it was such a chance. Interestingly, this position is already much, okay, maybe not much better, but clearly better for black. Even though it sounds weird, but actually it is. The problem for white is the c2 pawn and this knight on c3, which is somehow misplaced. And this game is an interesting example of ignoring the d file, since the d file is an open file and normally in the most cases we would fight for that. But here simply rook a c8, rook d3, b5. So my target is the c2 pawn, a3. And now I play rook d8, but not to fight for the d file, but to remove to trade one pair of rooks. Since otherwise, when white would play rook d1, he has doubled rooks on the d file, so kind of annoying for me. Rook d8, rook d1, rook takes, queen takes, and now h6, a useful move, first of all creating a window for the king and also kicking away the bishop. And he was kind of, it's not like forced to play bishop d2, but also it was a point about bishop takes a3 idea, so that's why he decided to play bishop d2, protecting the knight. And here it's another good position for you to think a bit. I give you 5 seconds to pause this video if you would like to improve your chess. A hint for you that some of my pieces are well placed, some of them can be improved. And here the queen is well placed, the rook is also well placed. Actually, all my pieces are well placed, but these pieces have something to do on the c file, and that's why it doesn't really make sense to play rook d8, then queen e2, and let's say bishop e1 or bishop somewhere, trading the rooks. It's my rook is well placed on the c file and it's doing a job, while his rook on d1 is doing nothing. So I don't want to trade my good rook for his bad rook. And like one of the best moves in this position is knight e8. I was seriously considering this move, but I decided to play another move. Knight e8, the idea is either to play knight d6 followed by knight c4 or maybe knight f5. Also another idea is bishop f6, thinking about taking on c3 in the right moment. I played bishop d8, another way of like the idea is about like making pressure on this knight, and the point is to play bishop a5. While it's important to understand that white has not much to do, he's just in a passive position. So bishop e1, bishop a5, the idea is quite simple: to take on c3, then knight d5, attacking the like probably the bishop on c3, and then grabbing the pawn on c2. So that's why b4, bishop c7, still threatening something, bishop e5, queen e2, then bishop b6, h3, and still there is nothing else to do but knight e8. And the idea is quite simple: knight d6, then maybe knight to c4, knight f5 is also interesting, then knight to d4, queen e5. And here it's a nice position to think a bit. So take your time, pause this video. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Let's go. So the move is the best move, by the way. Pawn, bishop d8. How do you like that? So like last moves I did, they were all about these minor pieces and mainly placing them to the back rank. But actually there is an unpleasant threat for white, bishop f6. So knight e2. I cannot take the pawn on c2. In this case, it's rook c1. Bishop f6, queen e3, and simply knight d6, thinking of knight c4 or knight f5. White could have played something like c3, knight c4, queen c1, but in this case, of course, his position is just so passive. I can do whatever, maybe queen to e4, maybe this time thinking about trading the rooks. Maybe e5 is something interesting, grabbing space in the center, followed by e4. But in the game it was knight d4, so simply taking on d4, queen d4, knight f5, and grabbing the c2 pawn. I'm fine about trading the queens. And knight e7, placing the knight to d5 to the good square, which is protected by the e6 pawn. So queen d4, knight d5, still offering him to trade the queens. For example, queen a7 is not an option at all. Then there is queen c2 with oh sorry, not queen c2 of course, but queen e2. Yeah, in case of queen c2, then rook c1, but it is queen e2 with double attack. So in the game it was queen takes c4, rook takes c4, rook c1, and just rook takes c1, bishop c1. And the plan is quite simple. I have 4 pawns against 3 pawns on the king side, so I need to create a passed pawn there, and then maybe I will use it as as a gift for white to distract his pieces and bring in my king to the queen side, grabbing all the pawns there. So e5, king f1, h5, first slightly improving my pawn structure, since I always have enough time to bring my king to the center. But of course, since this is the endgame position, it's quite important to bring the king to the center. King e6, king e4, f5, and simply f4. Then next move I can go forward with king f5, then either thinking about e4 at some point, or just maneuvering my knight to attack the h4 pawn, or maneuvering this knight to c4 first. So quite easy to win this position. So in this game my opponent was unlucky that the pairings were out just 20 minutes before the game, so he had no time to prepare, and I okay, maybe not surprised him with this opening, but yeah, by the way, here at some point it was 45 minutes for him and 1 hour 30 minutes for me, probably somewhere here, I guess. Yes, and so he was not able to find the best decision, like here taking on f6, but after queen d2, bishop e7, it's already it's at least slightly unpleasant position for white. What to say? I think, not sure about the first one. Yes, maybe first one is not really, but I think my opponents, of course, they underrated. The guy from the second round, he had 2350 2 years ago, and of course he's not 2240. Also, I just blundered. So, but also this guy now. Okay, I was lucky that pairings appeared just 20 minutes before the round. Otherwise, it would be not that easy game, since in the second round he had a completely winning position with black against 25-50, something like that. So I play with boys who underrated, and also there is such a typical story. I call them hero of the start. So the hero of the start is, let's say, a low-rated player who grabs points from higher rated players, and usually they are fine in first 2-3 rounds, and then they already like tired, or they know their place, like so that they did the job by beating somebody or drawing against a GM, and then they go down in the cross table. So it's important not to play against such guys. And I wouldn't say like my opponents, they kind of, yeah, for example, yeah, for example, this guy was like, okay, I won the game and that's fine. So now it's time to go to the red square to eat ice cream. There is a wonderful tasty ice cream on the red square, so a deserved ice cream for the day of suffering. The red square, of course, is always a place to visit. A lot of people here. And here is central, let's call it just shop, with high prices for everything except the ice cream, and like one of the best ice cream I have ever tried.